now they impose a duty.
That's authority.
You were sitting down.
Maybe you wouldn't walk that.
I'm not driving at night.
All right. 7:05, back to business. We have a motion on the book to accept the operating budget. And Mr. Tanaka, would you like to speak to this?
I'll thank you, my learned compatriots, Mr. Ed Zitten.
The operating budget that you have in front of you,
I think you have to speak up.
the operating budget that you have in front of you is a little bit different from the one that was presented March 12th. There are three changes. One of the changes is the amortization for 2014 has been reduced after calculating the new additions in 2013 and the ones that actually are fully amortized. So that is a result of $21,911 decrease in expenses. Then there's an increase in the Rec Board operating grant, $26,692, and that was due to them asking for an increase in operating, in return not asking for a capital grant. So the decrease in the Rec Board capital grant in the budget, in the interim budget, that grant was $45,270. They're not asking for one this year, so that reduces the expenses by $45,270. And when you get your March balance sheet, you'll notice a new restricted surplus account with the amount of $50,000, which is according to the resolution the council passed, I believe, in one of the March meetings. And that's it as far as changes go. There are a few additional things I would like to mention to council. One of them is our assessments have gone up 4% from last year, equivalent about $10 million. 1% tax rate, just on the assumption 1% tax rate, that's about $100,000 in additional tax revenue that is not included in the budget. So if we stick with the budgeted tax revenues that we have in the budget now, there will be a slight decrease in the tax rate. I don't know how much, but since we will actually generate $100,000 or would generate $100,000 more in revenue at the current tax rates, we don't need it, it's not in the budget, so the tax rates will actually come down a little better than right now. And as municipal affairs mentioned, how the tax rates are supposed to be calculated is you take the revenue, the tax revenue the council has budgeted, divided by the assessment base. So, according to municipal affairs, we're not supposed to keep the tax rate constant. We're supposed to drive the tax rate from that formula. The budget for tax revenues divided by the assessment base. But we have a pretty good idea if taxes are going to go up or down based on the amount of revenues that are in the budget. So that's a little bit of additional information. I've also included statement of operations for the period ending March 31st. There still may be some adjustments to it, but just to give you an idea, you haven't had a statement in 3 months. So you can take a look at it, and I believe the operating net operating line is showing a small deficit, but the budget is showing a much larger deficit. We haven't engaged in any capital projects right now, so we really don't have any earned capital revenue to speak of. That'll come later on in the year. That's it as far as updates go with the budget. And we are ready to answer any questions, any inquiries that you may have about the operating budget, anything on the balance sheet, restricted surplus.
Can you tell me the exact amount of the assessment that the assessor has given you?
The can tell you the exact amount the assessor has given me.
You said it's a 4% increase?
What was it?
Yes, Councillor Andrew?
I'm sorry, Debbie, I couldn't.
I just asked what the increase was for the assessment. Did you say 3%?
4%. Which should have no effect on taxes. The rate will change, but the tax will be the same. Value went up, rate went down, everything's the same.
All right, tell me the assessment value.
The assessment value, I have a total of $257,733,280. And on top of that, there's, seniors municipal levy of $994,000, so roughly almost $1 million. So you could call it $258 million if you wanted to round it. That was the assessment as of December. I should say the assessment as of, I believe, July 2013, the supposed current market value then. And that's used for the 2014 tax year.
So you're expecting 258.
Roughly
259.
Sure.
Almost 259
In assessment, taxable assessments
in assessments.
composed of residential and non-residential.
And you're asking for, as an operating budget, how much?
As far as tax revenues go,
No, for as expenses. Not as tax revenue, but as how much you would,
we go down to
$9 million.
page 12, some of the income statement. Here's the budget, there's almost $1 million as tax revenue said. And that includes amortization.
I'm wondering how they figured out the the assessment's going up. What did they do to make that calculation before they, do they have to assess every house when they haven't done that? They just come up with a percentage rise that they've estimated? How did they do that?
There have been some new buildings, the theater, for one. There have been buildings out on, I think, Northern Metallic is now complete. And there's also inflation, which increases the assessed value.
Okay, so those new buildings plus the inflation rate, they're estimating that everything will go up that little bit, or that 4%.
It's a 4%, so inflation is roughly around 2%. And another 2% for the increase in value of the buildings. It's a $10 million increase in assessment, so a couple of those buildings put together has got to be a couple $1 million. And then on top of 257, well, last year was 240, basically 249 million. So you take 2% of that, you're getting around 4%. Just about increase.
okay, for those that don't understand how this mill rate, say, could you actually show us on the board a little bit of how this assessment with the expenses translates into setting a mill rate?
Well,
And
yes,
use easy figures that calculate out for a, let's say a 10% mill rate.
this is the formula municipal affairs would like municipalities to use. So you've got so you've got your tax. What you do is you figure out what your tax revenues need to be in order to provide the surplus that you're looking for. So that's the first step of the equation. And that's what we're doing tonight. Setting the budget. Once you set the budget, the tax rate is just a is simply tax revenues divided by your assessment. And I'll call it assessment based because some of the assessments are non-taxable. So it's it's taxable assessment base. And there's an assessment base for residential properties and assessment base for non-residential properties. The non-residential is broken into a number of things like linear, commercial, industrial, but it's all non-residential. And with residential, it's farmland and residential. That's what makes it. So that's basically it. So say for instance you've got $100. Let's say for instance you've got $1,000 in assessment. So 100 divided by 1,000 gives you, that's a big tax rate of course, it gives you 10%. If I added some more zeros here, say I added 2 more zeros, it would move it to 1%. That's how it's calculated. That's how municipal affairs would like you to calculate it. And how we can get to the tax rate that was used last year is by basically using the same revenues that were generated last year. Now we got a little bit of a bonus because the assessment base has gone up. So we're still using the same revenues as last year. The assessment base went up. It's going to result in a lower tax rate. Not that much, but a lower tax rate. So the direction is in the right direction. That's how it works.
Okay? You probably don't understand because it's convoluted. So what happens is, if you've got $100,000 house, so your house is worth $100,000, and you set your tax rate at 10%, you're going to move this to $1,000 for taxes, correct? So for every $100,000 your house is worth, you're going to pay $1,000 in taxes. So that's why this figure over here is the mill rate. It's what they keep talking about, the mill rate. Now for us, now, the residential mill rate is how much?
So roughly 10.
11.1.
11.1.
So, if you've got an 11.1 mill rate, and your house in 2013 was worth $100,000, in 2014, he's saying your house is now being assessed at $104,000 because it's 4% more. You can keep the same mill rate and get more money because you're now multiplying this. If we're going to keep this same 10% mill rate, you're now going to get $1,004.
40.
1,040. Your taxes went up.
Keep in mind, I'm suggesting the exact opposite of that.
Okay, but this is how the calculation works. It's very important to know what the assessment base is, so that's why I asked. And then this is fixed. The assessor has fixed this. We now know this number will not change. The only number that can change is, and when you say tax revenues, is that not, that is
Operating expense?
that's the revenues that are coming in from the mill rate, right?
That's right.
Okay, so if you set a lower mill rate, the revenues will go down. Right?
No, not in this, well, in this case, yes, they will, if you set a lower mill rate. In fact, that's the idea, you set a lower mill rate because the assessment base has gone up. So in order to derive the same tax revenues, as last year, we don't need to set exactly the same mill rate as last year, we can set one that's a little bit lower, because the assessment base has gone up.
The assessment went up, so nobody's saving any money unless we actually set a lower mill rate. Cause the assessment's gone up.
More than the 4% increase on value is what you're trying to say, correct?
Yeah,
So they're
so I think, this is confusing to me. I'm more working from the back way. I would be coming back and saying, how much money do you need to operate the town? And then, if I know that you need $8 million to operate the town, and you've got an assessment of, how much, what was that?
250.
250 million. Then my question would be, what would the mill rate be in order to get this $8 million?
Isn't that what he's recommending?
That's what it's saying.
No, he's saying offset, so there is no change to the revenue, so the mill rate will go down, tax revenue will stay the same, because our tax assessment base went up. What she's saying is, she wants, I don't know what, I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but what it sounds like is she would like an actual lowering of taxes in order to save money. Instead of lowering by 4%, we need to go 4.5, 5, 6, above the 4%, so there is a lowering of taxes.
We're talking that part of this tax revenue increase is because of new buildings, right?
Yes, the assessment.
Then we are reducing the tax rate for the individual.
Yeah.
Yes,
Exactly.
everybody will go.
Exactly. Exactly.
And each year, as
So
we
for-
grow and develop and we have more of a tax base,
And we keep the
and we
revenue
keep the revenues the same,
the mill rate
then
goes down.
the mill rate goes down, right?
Now,
It's about 1.5%.
But it goes down, right? Is that,
Yeah.
People,
unless our expense, our revenues go up, like we need more
$55.
revenue, but if we're operating, if we're able to operate with tax revenues based on what we're budgeted for, then assessment going up, and that will be based on growth mostly, and potentially inflation and a few other factors, then that's what's gonna drive it, the mill rate down.
as long as expenses don't increase when you go
Exactly,
from the
yeah.
properties and adding of whatever else.
Cause that could be infrastructure and other things that
Because
are part of that.
every time we add something, yes, we put 2 new buildings, but we add more expenses, it's moved.
But he's not saying we've added
Yes,
more.
we have. This is a larger budget than it was last year. Mr. Walker?
Part and parcel of that is buying and selling of gas as well. That will inflate your budget. Because, if the purchase of gas is $5.70 a gigajoule, then, and we purchase more gas cause it's cold, your budget numbers are gonna go like this, but your revenues are also gonna balance that and your profit margin is gonna be higher.
But we're not asking for revenues to go up, are we? Because that would be the other option, would it not?
Well, the revenues will go up because,
Dependent upon weather with natural gas, right?
What you call it?
Yes.
But we're talking about
Tax
tax
revenues.
revenues. Let's not confuse the entire budget, which has other elements of revenues. We're talking about the 3.2 million tax revenue versus the assessment. That is what makes up the municipal tax rates. And that's all we're talking about. So there are no expenses here, but we got revenues and assessment to generate the municipal tax rates.
So Linda, what
no,
you're really getting.
Councillor Anderson?
Sorry.
I just wanted to ask her, I know that now we're gonna look at utility rates. I'm really curious on, we basically have a mill rate for commercial, a mill rate for residential. We don't differentiate between sitting on vacant land, undeveloped properties versus developed properties though. It's just based on value. Is it something that we, well, maybe you know, is it something we've looked at in the past? That if there's an X amount of time that this land has been sitting there, raw land, someone's owned it, after an X period of time, we start increasing the mill rate.
we don't do it just for that problem. If we increase the mill rate, it's for the whole class.
So do you know of any of the municipalities that do that though?
No.
Most of them just like we do, we set a residential and a non-residential
Okay,
mill rate.
the reason I'm asking is a developer could buy some property and then sit on it for 35 years, waiting for the golden goose, instead of doing anything with it, and I don't like that. Okay?
Councillor Canassa?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, cause we do, I mean, even the Essos of the world that have left that lot vacant, if there was some way of giving them some incentive to, do something with it and sell it, but right now they can pay that little bit of tax and let it sit there for years. My question, I guess, was, I think what you were getting at is asking more of a question is, what is this going to mean to the homeowner and their tax dollars with this proposed budget? What do you see that happening for the homeowner?
Essentially, their bill will remain the same. The total amount that they pay, I'm generalizing now, because some people, if their assessment's lower, they'll actually pay less taxes. But on the average, what'll happen is their tax bill will remain the same. This is what other municipalities do, they keep the tax rate constant. This is a common thing. Municipalities like to keep the tax rate constant and reap the benefits of a rising assessment base. So what we are doing is actually providing, I would call it a bit of a break to the taxpayers compared to other municipalities, because we are going to lower the tax rate because the assessment base has gone up. We didn't do that last year. Last year we kept the tax rate constant and we reaped the benefits of an increasing assessment base. So the tax bill for a taxpayer was higher. But they were pretty happy because the value of the property went up. That's how municipalities essentially sell it.
I actually don't think many people were happy, so a different point of view there. Mr. Tomato?
Madam Chair, it's not just a question of looking at the individual household. You have to look at the services and the level of services that council is authorizing to spend within the town. And all of those things tend to drive the amount of the revenue to match the expenses. What we have here now, if you go beyond the issues of just individual houses, what you will see is a net deficit within the operating budget of about 1.3 million. In a good sustainable society, the goal is to move that to a balanced budget, even within the essence of amortization. If you look at the actuals that we had in the 2013 audit, the net operating deficit was 400,000. You compare that with the budget that we have now, we have 1.3 million. In our discussion, in terms of what to sustain this town, is when we start budgeting to a point where the net operating deficit is much closer to zero. So that if you don't have future capital grants, this town can sustain itself just with its revenues and managing its expenses. Just to add a little bit more to the discussion.
Okay, this is my theory on your capital grants and grants from the province and everything. There are 1,100 communities, municipalities in the province of Alberta, and every one of them is suffering because they do not have enough income in order to cover their expenses. Now, we can get as much income as we possibly can from raising taxes and cutting back and doing as much as we can, but we are still going to drown. But lo and behold, there's a life raft there, and we're not going to drown like other municipalities that are really in bad shape. They're down there. The province will, and the federal government will, bail these municipalities out. They cannot survive. They are looking, the province and the federal government is talking about this constantly. They want amalgamation of municipalities, they want efficiencies, they want everything we can possibly give. Who are they going to save when they finally say we've got to do something? Are they going to save the ones that are closest to the life raft because they have skimped and saved and scraped and eked out everything? Or are they going to go for the ones down at the bottom? They're going to go for everybody, but the ones that suffered the most, which you're saying we are going to suffer because we're going to make our taxpayers pay more, we're not gonna get anything more. The ones at the bottom that said, let's do the best we can, but we're not gonna load it up on the taxpayer, they're gonna benefit just as much. That's the history of what happens with provincial and federal governments. We are at the low end of the scale. We can't survive, and we can't keep putting this on the property owner. I had talked last year to the previous council, I gave them information. Our community is one of the highest taxed in our cohort. We have been running, and we ran an election, I don't know, except for Councillor Long, who has told me for sure he did not. Most of us were elected to reduce the tax burden on the community. I'm looking at, I gave figures out, I said, the administration, the operating budget should remain the same as 2013. It should not include any increases. Provincial government staff have been told no increases whatsoever. We, on the other hand, said no, our staff is working hard, maybe we can afford to give them an increase. But that should be you find that increase. You look in your budget and you cover it. The 2013 budget and what you spent there should be exactly the same as the 2014. No increase at all. And then you would see the 4% that is coming in on increased assessment would really go back to the taxpayers. Councillor Amdur.
My question would be, I'm not sure how we can keep you could keep the operating expense the same even with giving a raise to the employees, but then you're cutting corners elsewhere, you're cutting something else out of the budget.
Yes.
So, I guess you could, but I would like to go back to, if we're gonna ask operating to cut, then council itself should have led by example and did their own cuts. And
Go ahead.
I mean, I tried.
But not necessarily in
grants.
grants.
Way in everything, so,
Look at what
Point of
was-
order, Councillor
Yes.
Victor has the floor. Okay.
being the chair.
But you can't interrupt every single person all the time.
That's-
If we can't interrupt,
All
what
right,
gives you the right to
fine.
interrupt everybody?
I agree, I would love to see taxes drop. I'm trying to find ways of manipulating information and numbers through utility rates, through, vacant commercial industrial property lines that haven't been developed. I wanna find options, but I don't have enough information right now to just say that the operating has to be the same, because if we increase salaries by $50,000, where's that 50,000 being cut? So if you can see it, great, put it forward. But I see we added more expenses even to the town, right, to the employees and to the operating, so.
Sure, I'll jump in.
That's wrong.
Which one of us wants to go to our employer and say, I wanna reduce my wages? I don't want an increase. Step up now, tell me. Who's gonna go to ATCO or to college or to Fountain or to West Fraser and say, you know what? No, I don't want a raise. Matter of fact, why don't we look at even reducing? We gotta have some deficiencies. The people that got the $50,000 raise, divided amongst all these people, have earned it. And we need to look at retention, because retention is extremely important. And if we lose staff to the patch, if we lose staff to the competitors out there that are paying more, then we're gonna have a real problem. Because then you won't be able to sustain the community, fix the community, maintain the community, run the community. And you can cut the mill rate all you want, you're still gonna have potholes coming out the yin-yang. So there's a balancing point. And again, if you cut the mill rate by 1, that's 7% reduction in tax revenue. You cut 7% out of our budget of $8 million. Where are you cutting it from? Now everybody's talked about this, yourself, your Mayor and Quentin and others. Everybody said, well, we gotta find these deficiencies. Nobody that's been advocating this reduction in mill rate has been able to step up to the plate and say, this is where we're going to do it. They're saying, no, you guys find it. You find the deficiency. If you ran on a platform of cutting the taxes, if you ran on the platform of saying, I'm gonna cut the mill rate by 1%, 2%, whatever, but then dump it back onto the very staff that you're saying you want to have cut, that in itself is either lacking foresight or is hypocritical. You have to say, if you have a vision, if you have that plan of saying, this is what I'm gonna cut, and I'm gonna make your taxes go down, be brave. Tell the public, tell the people of this community what it is you're gonna cut. Don't just sit there and pontificate to everybody else that this is what I'm gonna do. I want these taxes cut. I want the mill rate dropped, and therefore we're gonna have 7% reduction, and this is where we're gonna do it, people. We're gonna cut here, here, and here, and this is what we're gonna do, and then I could say I'll buy into it. But nobody has done that. Everybody has said, tell us where we need to cut. Herb, tell me where we're cutting. Kelly, you guys, tell us, because I want that reduction in taxes. That's not the way it's done. If you have the vision and you have a plan of where you want those tax reductions cut, tell the public where you want them cut, so that they can make the voting election. They can say, yes, she is saying we're going to reduce taxes, but here's the services that we're going to lose, because it's about losing services. I don't buy into the fact that every community is going to struggle and those poor ones down here are going to get the same treatment that we're up here. When the times are tough and we're being fiscally prudent and we have a reserve, we won't be hit as hard as the ones who weren't fiscally prudent and don't have that reserve fund. That I think we're sitting pretty darn good. If you're going to make a reduction of that kind to this budget, let me know and let the taxpayers know where it is that you see the cuts coming from. Because all I'm hearing is cut, let's reduce these taxes. We promised to, you promised, and I said it before, be careful what you ask for. Because if you reduce the mill rate and you reduce your taxes, you reduce the revenue, you reduce the services. What services do you have envisioned that are so out of whack that we need to cut? Rec board, there's a duplication of services. The Johnson report said it should be amalgamated into the town. We would reduce the duplication of services. We would save money. Nobody has stepped up and said, yes, let's do it. We've hinted at it, but nobody said we need to entertain discussions with the MD, we need to entertain discussions with the Recreation Board and see bringing it back into the fold so that we actually have control of the facilities that we own and not to some other outside entity. There's some savings right there. But keeping in mind when you do that, you're laying people off. Citizens of this community are going to have job losses because of the actions that we take in bringing that rec board into the fold. You tell them. You tell them, you say your jobs are at risk. Where is it that you want to cut? Because you're reducing the services, you're reducing the revenue. Where? It's not up to them to tell us. If you have a vision and you keep on telling us that you want this done, and here we are at the last moment, and we get this, and it infuriates me. I apologize. I'm trying to be respectful.
I'm waiting.
But where? Where do we cut?
All right.
Or do we keep it as status quo?
Any other comments?
I'm done.
Councillor Hampton?
Just because I just love to rebut.
I know.
I know. So I get a little confused when you say you want the redundancies of the rec and bring the rec back under the fold of the town. The rec's never been under the town, it's its own
Into
entity.
the fold. Not back. I apologize.
Thanks, buddy. No worries.
Sorry.
Okay. And I do agree with you, and I did bring it up, that that is my goal in this 4 years, to bring the rec, and I also want to bring the golf course under the rec and all of it back into the town. So that is my goal also. But then you you go against yourself and you say, well, but we don't want people to lose jobs, cause you gotta remember, people are gonna lose jobs. You got that human side, and I understand that. Right now, reality or not, we gotta figure something else out. Grant Lee stood up at the first roundtable meeting and talked about how, he has employees that can make 2 to 3 times the income if they went to Fort Mac. But lifestyle plays a big part of their choice to be here. And that's one of the things that we need to pursue, is the way our CAO creates a better team, a better, happier environment to work in, not just about the dollar, with the interactions and the meetings and the development. The aspirations that at some point people will retire, and there will be positions at the top to go for. So there's a whole picture, that's all I wanna say.
And
Councillor Rose?
just going forward, how we just increase potentially the, assessment? When you're saying about creating a healthy environment at the town and a good place to work, this council's doing a lot of things, and I know the public doesn't know all of the things, cause we're more busy than we can actually find the time to tell them what we're doing. But if we're successful in some of the endeavors, hopefully what we'll put in place is maybe a more welcoming environment for development and for a business and for a bigger tax base, right? A bigger tax assessment that will allow us to, in time, lower taxes. So I mean, maybe we can't do it right now, but I know we all want to do it. We all wanna go forward and see that it's a better place to live and hopefully lower taxes.
Councillor Canal?
Yeah, and I agree. I think when you gotta look at where you wanna keep the quality of the town up, there's probably some rooms for efficiencies though, and I think we need to look at Kelly at where those efficiencies are, because I know, I mean, you look at Buchanan Lumber, right? They had 3 shifts, they cut down to 2. They still produced the same amount of lumber when times got tough, and they saved tons of money doing it. I don't know when the towns had to make any cuts in the last little while and found any more efficiencies. And there probably is some efficiencies in there. Can I find those cuts? No, I don't know the system well enough to find those cuts. We need Kelly to give us some options and say, this is what we can do. And I do expect some of those options, not to say, no, I'm not gonna give you any options, you gotta find them yourself, because unless I'm sitting in that chair and going out every day and seeing what's happening, I can't find those efficiencies. There's no way. So we need to work with the town to say, and, you know, Vern and Brian and Herb, and say, where can we save some money? We need to cut some corners, because I know even at the college, we had to cut back. We didn't reduce our services, but we did save some money. There's probably some efficiencies and some practices that have been developed over the years that could be improved. And we need to look at some of those, and we need some direction on those. Is it gonna happen right now in this particular budget? Probably not. But I would say moving ahead, that's where we're gonna look at, and what would be their recommendations. The other thing, I agree with Debbie, we can increase revenues. It doesn't necessarily just have to be cutting costs. And the other one I would like to look at, we're sort of looking at it on how we can change utility rates, and I'm hoping that might be something we can get today, because I wanted to know what happens when, you know, our utility rates, and I'm pretty sure we asked for something to come back here to look at, but the utility rates and what's common utility rates, can we make some not savings, but can we bring in some additional revenue from that to help balance this off? Because I know the tax rate as it sits is a deterrent for some people wanting to move into this town. You know, people would just as move into the MD, capitalize on all of the benefits of the town, of all of the facilities we have, and mostly rec facilities, which make the town better, but wanna capitalize on that. So we're in a difficult spot, but I think we can work with our MD to get a little more contribution from them, and we're working on that now. We've been talking about things, and so I think we're moving in the right direction, and it's not gonna change overnight, but those are where we,
Councillor Tanaka?
From my personal opinion, this is all new to me. Mill rates, assessments, that kind of stuff. Regarding the idea of, looking at the possibility of raising, the utility costs. I have some concerns with that in that the rec board clearly stated that what's killing them is the cost of utilities. If we look at raising them, the budgets for the rec board is gonna go, so we're not really gonna gain anything.
can I rebut that?
No, let's go Councillor After and then I'll do.
One of the things I don't know is mine. What he might say is, half those expenses for the rec board would be covered by the MD also. So if we raise the rates of the water, we would save essentially money. I'm trying to recall a conversation we had probably 2 to 3 months ago, probably in this chamber, seems familiar, where we asked, I'm not sure if the direction was given, we had a discussion only for different operating grants to be brought forward. I know there was discussion of Herb would prefer that we say cut this or cut that. I think the example was talk about, well, you could cut snow removal on sidewalks, or I remember a conversation about this, and my response was, but I don't know what that value is, so how do I say cut that? But I thought we talked about like a 2.5% drop or something like that in operating. Does anybody else recall this
Yep.
conversation?
Cause I asked for how much would it cost for if we didn't do the lawn, boulevard cutting this year. How many dollars would that be if homeowners had to cut their own boulevard in front of their place? How many students? And now that you're finished, you want a rebuttal? We've had 2 vacancies, both filled. Those vacancies could have been left. Wouldn't have cut anybody's jobs, they were vacant positions, both filled. And I asked the CEO, why did you fill them? You know from last year, we went through this, we are looking for efficiencies, and they still went ahead and filled them. Okay? What about the telephones? If you looked at the contracts, we have TELUS Mobility, TELUS Communications, and TELUS whatever. There's a business person that is in TELUS. He comes out and he looks at your plans and he consolidates. This is something that any business person continuously looks at. The accountant, the auditor, what did the auditor tell us? He said the books are great, the numbers added up. Any auditor can do that, as long as they are certified by municipal affairs, and yes, they have the certification, go ahead and get them. Because all they're doing is just regurgitating our numbers, which are good numbers. Why are we paying top dollars for that? Why aren't we going out and getting another contract? What about the garbage disposal? Have we gone through these contracts? Have we gone out to bid? Have we asked our staff? What places can we create efficiencies? Come back to us and give us a 3% cut in your thing and tell us where to do it. These are the things we're paying our administration to do. I've already gone through this. I can tell you, I've already told you 4 things right there. But these are the things that in the last year, I thought our administration would have brought to us and said, look, who was it that said, get on the gas rate, not the gas rate, MEC, the services. I did. I brought it back and said, do this. And now we're saving money, but do we know how much? No, I still don't know how much. But at least I know I think we're saving. Councillor Amter.
It was brought to my attention at a rec board meeting this week that AUMA charges a high benefits. Good fortune, another council was there that has more information in this area and said that the rec department could save substantially if they had switched or would switch their benefits over instead of going through the town with AUMA. So I don't know the facts. I trust the councillor told me what is true. So if there's an option where we could save 5%, 10%, whatever it is, we're still saving tax dollars. So I think that, yeah, I will agree with the mayor on this, that we need to look at what options are available on the table without cutting services, without losing employees, or cutting pay or doing anything like that. What other areas can we pursue? Putting out to bid, the auditing, putting out to bid, whatever.
The airport contract, $12,000 for somebody to go out to the airport and vacuum the floor and clean the toilets. Do you think that that's worth $12,000? That's the only bid we got. But if you think about it, we have public works employees that we could say, look, this is going to have to be part of your job. And you can smile all you want, but that's what happens in a real business. Mr. Tomato first.
Madam Chair, I know we're going to operational nitty-gritty, I call it. But it's very important to go back 3 years ago when this town was almost crying for money. And the audit fee was around $80,000. And the books were so much in disarray that it was an embarrassment to the town of Prairie. 3 years ago, the CEO and the public works staff could not even have a chat. 3 years ago, public works couldn't even walk into the town office and get along with the town office staff. 3 years ago, 2009, simple capital grants could not be applied for, and projects were not done for 2 years. 3 years ago, we all sat here wondering where the town of Prairie was going to go. Today, we are here sitting on so much surplus, and we're still fighting. What has this been? In the last 3 years, every year we brought in at least $2 million in capital grants. Tom Child told me that a street that was repaired, that for 30 years, nothing was done on that street. And for that matter, he's so grateful. You go back to bridges and all the roads here, people have been employed, the town is active, and today we can rip off on the solid infrastructural benefits to a point that West Fraser can come and sit here and say, look, we need infrastructural support, and I can go back to my public works folks in the morning and say, guys, we need more water, and I know we can deliver on that. This town has turned a corner. There is so much we have in terms of what we put on the table. We can balance the budgets. The year-end cash in the bank was $7 million. Our reserve is close to $5 million. We couldn't say that 3 years ago. We were fighting over money. The budget today, Madam Chair, is no different from the budget last year. You sat here and asked for grants for various things. You were capable of doing that, we supported you. It was more than last year that we were able to accommodate that. Regardless of that, we have dedicated that there will be a zero tax increase, regardless of what you want to do. That's all we ask for. Most of the council is so new. In April, Warren Powers, in addition to all the orientation that you've gone through, will come here to do assessment orientation for you to understand the ramifications of what it means to either reduce taxes, not reduce taxes. I spoke to Carrie's Speaker Smith yesterday, and she said about 7 years ago, the same move to reduce taxes was made irresponsibly, without taking into consideration the scientific data that will allow for the taxes to be reduced, and for 5 years the town of Prairie had to pay the price. That's what she said. I'm not a policy maker, I don't make these decisions. But all I can tell you is that this town is in a much better, stronger position to attract more business, increase its tax base, and if you keep the tax revenues like Herb has done, your mill rate will go down. And if next year you want to reduce taxes with a greater understanding of all the implications, because you've been here for 1 year, you have administration to work with. The choice is yours, and the facts are straight.
Councillor Hampton?
No, I'm just resting. Thanks, so.
Councillor Panassa?
I was just gonna say, I think we've all had a chance to speak up and say our minds here and where we want, and I can appreciate, you know, what people wanna see some lower taxes, and we know we hear that around, and I think we're not raising taxes, we're holding the thing, we might be, you know, hopefully in the future can find where we can save some more money. We've mentioned some good ideas that we can look into, we've talked about, you know, other ones, the rec board, and as we move forward, I think we can get there. And I also think that, you know, part of the reason I ran was hearing how bad a shape the town was in, and I'm a lot more comfortable being in here knowing what I know now than I was before. And I gotta say, I think things are heading in the right direction. I think we're in the right place, and, you know, that's a credit to Kelly and Herb and the rest of the town people moving us in the right direction. We can't lose our focus, because we can go the wrong way really quick, but I think it's good, and I think we need to move ahead and go from here.
Any other comments? Councillor Carrier?
There's been lots and lots of good comments been made, and what I really like is we should be leading by example. We've got all these grants we approved, and we passed quite a few of them. Our budget is looking great. We are, from last night's presentations, they said things are great. If you're gonna cut, people have told me they'd rather see taxes stay the same and receive the same services they have. If you're gonna cut, then what are we gonna cut? The swimming pool, the arena, streets? Is there efficiencies that can be done? Yes, and I'm sure our staff will look after it. I'm sure they're working hard. They hear our concerns. Time to move on to other things that we need to take care of.
You know, and I guess I have to respond to that. When you say the staff has heard our concerns, no, I do not feel that the staff has heard the concerns. I have not seen anything where people have come and said, the CEO, we've saved $100,000, we've saved $50,000, we've saved $20,000. I have never heard that in the whole year the whole previous year, and I have not heard it this year. I have never heard anybody come and say, hey, we've saved some money here. That I would have to say no. Councillor Panassa?
Just to respond, I think Kelly just mentioned that we saved money from from the audit being $80,000 down to, what is it?
40,000.
So there's 40,000 right there. I mean, there has been some savings in that right off the bat.
Councillor Hampton?
Debbie and I had this discussion over the hallway, and one of the reasons, besides Herb's knowledge and abilities, is I believe we updated a lot of our software and had some other modalities brought in, which has made things easier. So it could be a combination of his knowledge and abilities and other things that we spent and increased money on to get done.
Now, before we get into the next thing, was council should lead by example. Council should lead by example. Here's the example. The 2013 year-to-date actual, $214,000 council spent. Do you know what the budget is for this year's council? 421. That's leading by example. That's on page 3 of 34. And this is a report, because the report that was given to you is only, it's the 2013, but it doesn't have the column for 2014. Well, just a minute, it's got, okay, let me see if I can find it on this one.
You bring it, where are we here? Legislative services.
Okay, right there.
So is
Yes?
is that us then?
Yes.
Legislative services is not legal in every
No,
other aspect,
no.
it's just council?
It, according to this one, it is just council.
To continue then, that was actually budgeted for 2013, we only spent 185, if I recall correctly from the audit. And I see the budget is 421 now. Unless Kelly's buying me a really nice car or two, or sending me around the world, yeah, I'm honest, I'm with you here, buddy. What's the $150,000 increase?
And this is things that were moved from other areas, or what is that?
Grants that were in other areas that are now legislative services.
Okay. Oh, if you, to take out these facts that were moved in order to make things line up better.
So we're good.
Just go back to the report.
Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Carrier?
In rebuttal to your question, you're saying you've been asking staff, show you where to cut. I've been asking you to show me, where are we gonna cut? I've been
Alright.
asking this council, where are we gonna cut? Since the day the budget has come out, my email has never said a single thing. Never. Never have I been brought here for a conversation about these. So if you're asking them to do the same thing, why don't you do that for us when we ask you?
Because every time I say anything, the CEO, the treasurer, and other people get all defensive because every time I say something, it's Linda wants to get rid of staff. Linda wants to cut. This is what I hear constantly. And this was the whole election campaign. If Linda's elected mayor, people are going to lose their jobs. That is all that I heard, and I do not want to hear it again. I accosted people that told me that, and they said, well, the rumor is just out there. Well, I'm sorry, but that is not what I want to do. But I don't want vacant positions filled. That's what I want. And I want to look out, and if we're gonna have a person that is on a contract to clean our areas out front, why are we still seeing salt all over the sidewalk? Why is that not swept up? That is absolutely despicable, and yet nobody says nothing about that. The Moostus building, which you referred to, another contractor, horrible dust and debris all around the parking lot. Disgusting. They have to complain and complain and complain before something is done. That means our contractors are not living up to our expectations. In the provincial government, many times, they have gone and said, look, we want to cut, and we're giving management the authority, you figure it out. 5% cut across the board. And provincial government, they do it like that. Because they're told to do it. They make it up with vacancies, they make it up with efficiencies, they make it up with any way they possibly can, and they live within their budget. Last year, I proposed that, and I was told, can't do that. Can't do a 5% cut across the board. You have to show us immediately, and I need to. You have to go line by line. That didn't work either. Councillor Hampton?
So the $150,000 difference in grants, is that grants that this council has approved, or was that money that was spent under a different area of the budget has now been corrected where it should reflect? And if so, where was it before?
Well, the major difference is the skateboard park. You got $100,000 in 2014 that you didn't have in 2013. There's $37,500 budgeted under the Parks Department for that. The idea of moving all the grants to the council departments, because council has the power to grant them, and it's all in one area. So yes, it's a little bit confusing because we've switched it from 2013 to 2014. Going forward, it should be a lot more transparent. It's mainly that skateboard part, $100,000 left last year, it was $32,000. And then you've got the Children's Resource Center, $30,000 this year, last year 0. So those are the two biggest contributors to that.
So when the skateboard park was, granted 75,000 from the previous council, how come it doesn't reflect, it reflects the 10 they spent? We've had this discussion, right? But I wanna get it clear, sorry. It reflects the 10%, the 10,000 they spent, and the other 65,000 is put onto our budget. So when I go up to people, and because if I'm Joe off the street and I don't know anything, and I look and go, holy crap, last year they did 66,800, this year you're doing 193,200. But like Linda said earlier, if I move that 65 over, it's 130 to basically 130. Not that I'm happy with that number either, but, why wasn't the 65 part of last year? Because they did the 75.
Yeah, because like, what, for the sake of just at a glance trying to see things, the grants used to be all over the place, and the parks and all of those things. So we're trying to accommodate them under one umbrella, so that when you look at them, you can print out and see. So it's an accounting change. The 10 legislative services is more than council. Council's spending evaluations will be based on individual council expenses and honorary. When people question, it's going to come down to individual issues. We can explain that our accounting format has changed with respect to legislative services, and there's no big issue about it. It's not that you've spent $250,000 more, but we just want to make sure that grants that are approved are in one place and not meant to make you look any bad. We have the same issue with common services. The auditors, for example, kept it in one place. We did a distribution. So as we go along, we're trying to find ways and means by which we can classify things that will make things a little much simpler. By so doing, 1 year may be a little different from the other year, but if you go 2-3 years down the line, you'll be able to measure them and evaluate them more sensibly. So there's some areas because of the accounting changes that may not make sense, but that's why you have notes and explanations, and you can go back and say, well, I did this for that reason.
And just also, we don't have an issue with the grants. You know, in the municipal act it says that if you feel it's equitable to do so, you've got that power to do it. What our issue is that in order to maintain the programs and services that council has directed, this is what we feel is the best budget. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say that you can't reduce tax revenues by $102,000 or $300,000. You can, but what's going to be the consequence? And just to show you what would be the consequence, in this spreadsheet that I have, I've got a column called what if. This year, there's not going to be a big consequence. It's going to happen next year when we only get in $700,000 in grants, capital grants. And if you cut the revenues this year, you're going to have to make up for it next year, and the taxpayers are really going to get clobbered. Because as you can see here, we will end up, when we go to the bottom line, with actually a deficit, keeping the same expenses and the same revenues if we only get in $700,000 in tax grants, in capital grants. And that's the way the provincial government is going. You kind of want municipalities to cover their own costs, and it's been a trend that's been happening. You can see that this year we've got $2.6 million. That uses up all our grant money. So going forward, we're just going to have the MSI capital and the basic BMTMG grant. That's the basic municipal transportation grant, which is about $700,000. Now, things could change. We could get more grants in, something could happen. But do you want to take the risk of Big Brother, federal government, and provincial government saving the day in 2016 happens? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But you're going to be accountable for it.
Well, they have told us many, many times that the regional collaboration program is supposed to cover off the MSI. Counselor Enter?
So in reality, when we look at the books right now, and I like the way you presented it, thank you. If I take that 2.6 in capital revenue and take that out, we're actually losing 1.25 million this year.
That's correct.
Operating in a deficit. So wouldn't it also make sense then to try and lower our operating expenses to trim that, so that next year, if we only get to 700,000 in the year, if we don't get anything? We're still gonna be operating at a negative 1.25 million, I'd rather do small steps over the next 3 years than all of a sudden go, well, now we're like Ontario, and half our people are unemployed, and nobody has any money, and this is what's gonna happen.
You're correct. I mean, you can reduce the operating.
Without changing the
But-
tax rate.
But not talking about tax revenues, but the MG is quite clear. It's council's responsibility to decide what programs and services are gonna be offered within the community, not the administration's. So we don't know where you guys wanna cut. And now one reason that the 5% across the board cut doesn't work is because you don't know where we're gonna cut. We're not gonna cut labor, you can be sure of that. So there's only other two things, contracted services and materials. Contracted services are probably what gets cut. So, the guys that do the contracts now, maybe you think, hey, might as well not do the contracts, not do a good job now. The thing is, they're probably gonna be the first ones to get cut. And then materials, so there won't be any mixture for the potholes and for all the other stuff we use materials for. Labor's the last that administration's gonna cut.
No, and I have no qualms with that at all. What I'm sorry, next one.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. What I'm hoping is that, management, and long-term employees can come forth and say, oh, look, one of the counselors said we can save a lot of money if we switch our benefit provider. Well, if we could save 50 grand a year, whew, that's a nice little chunk of change. And there may be other areas, like Brian's talking, that NLC had to face and had to live with, where you may go lose staff, but yeah, you gotta figure other things out. And the reason I wanna head that way is because what scares the hell out of me is I honestly think the government's not gonna rescue my bacon out of the fire, and I'm gonna end up swallowing it in 2016 or whatever in the future, and we're gonna have to have a balanced budget. Now, if they step forward and pay for my sewer and pay for my paving, my whatever else, that's awesome. But if they don't, I wanna know I can still flush my toilet and drive on the road.
If I may say so. When we know an area we can save, we save. A lot of times it's because we simply don't know. When my office staff wanted to get some monitors, we went out and we looked for the best price to get monitors, and we got monitors for $189 a piece. We could have spent $400 quite easily. We do that. We take a look at it. We're not all knowing. So there may be things out there, and you know what, and we may not be the quickest in acting too. Because I know Madam Mayor, you did mention about the electrical, and we did get on it, maybe not as quickly as we should have. Let us know, because we're a team. And if you guys know of something that can save us some money, just let us know, and we'll look into it.
Counselor Rose?
I just wonder if we don't demand from and try to work with administration a little better. I think you had some good ideas, and maybe there's some relationship issues that need to be dealt with too. Like you said, you demanded it last year and you didn't get it, and it sounded like really forcefully you're demanding it again, and obviously that's not working. But I think that it's us, it's council and administration trying to be able to work through some of these things. We have some suggestions. If we can bring them forward in a more positive way, maybe we'll actually be able to address them, and maybe we'll find that there are some inefficiencies and we can trim in some ways. But right now it just seems like it's a little bit too much of a battle that maybe is unnecessary.
Counselor Long?
I understand the need to be fiscally responsible. I understand the need to find the efficiencies and the inefficiencies. I do it on my stipend. If you look at what I claim and what I don't claim a lot. So I try where I can, and I probably make the least amount of anybody in this room. And so, I put my money where the mouth is. I'm not just prattling off. I understand the need to be fiscally responsible, but I also understand that there's serious ramifications if we look at a reduction in our mill rate at this point in time. I am not opposed to it. At this time, I think it's the wrong thing to do, that's all. I know that you put your reputation on this, and I understand that. And I am more than willing to look at down the road when we all have a better understanding of what the needs are, what our responsibilities are here, where we're at financially. And when we get ourselves on better footing, there's an opportunity for us to explore that. I just don't think it's this year.
Councillor Knassett?
I believe that one of the key things for us as a council to move forward and looking forward is gonna be that strategic plan. And I know we're reviewing that on the 15th, and I don't get to be there for that, but anyways, I think that's the key thing, where we look at, where we are wanting to head, setting those goals, setting the direction, and moving in that way. Because I think once we get some of those directions agreed on, and I know one of the things that we talked about when we set our strategic directions was where can we save some money, or we wanted to lower tax rates was one of our strategic directions. And I wanna see what some of the, what came out of that from everybody. How can we do some of that? And so I think that's going to help. I know we wanted to increase the communications with the public. How are we going to do that? And I know we've talked lots. Debbie's got an email out there right now. We want to hit up on either the town or the town's website or on the Facebook page, just council notes, to get that kind of information out there. Because, like I said, once you're more, it's a little bit easier to understand what the issues are. And I think it's very important that the town understands where these funding limitations are coming down the road, and understands this is a crunch coming. We need to spread that word with people so that they understand, we might be a little bit flush right now, but any surplus is not getting wasted. It's going to where we need it to go to, and we're gonna be in big trouble in a few years. The government is cutting back. So I think that strategic plan is gonna help us move ahead, bring some new businesses into town, increase that, the assessment base, which will indirectly lower our taxes, or at least maintain them. And I think if we can get that word out, we might not take as much heat as elected councillors for not lowering the taxes this time. Little bit, yeah. Little bit down, and you know what, that's a good thing. Well, and if we can say that, you know what, it's gone down a little bit, I think we need to promote that out there and get it out there. And say that this isn't the end, we're still looking for efficiencies. However, we have the federal and provincial government is reducing our funding significantly in the next few years. And that is our challenge, our biggest challenge moving ahead, is how are we going to, like Quentin said, how are we gonna balance that out in a couple of years? And we need to really look forward and how we're gonna do that.
The federal government would be good stuff.
Councillor Ember, do you have anything else to say?
No, but I will. The little bit is really little. At the moment, the $4 million increase in property assessment besides inflation, it's gonna be like $50 on a $300,000 property. $50 is what you're gonna save per year. So it will buy a couple people dinner, but I wouldn't really run off on vacation.
And I think what I'm really disappointed in is when we compare ourselves to other communities within the, for example, the town of Athabasca, the, town of Grimshaw, the, town of Valley View, which is, growing by leaps and bounds, and we look at their mill rates, ours is the highest. I keep looking at comparators, and all I see is that High Prairie is the highest. And I keep coming back to the fact, why can't we just be average? I would love to be in the middle of the pack. Councillor Rose?
Do you have those mill rates? Cause I have a list of mill rates here for, like, they're a couple years old, but Slave Lake, Blair, Valley View, McLennan, High Prairie, and we're pretty, I mean, Slave Lake's 6.8, I mean, like I say, they're a couple years old, so unless people have made drastic changes, but, McLennan's 20.
McLennan is 20,
And Valley View is 10, and we're 11, like, it's not a big difference, so if, like, do you have a list that's more current than?
I would have to go back and
So like, I mean, I don't see, Flair's 12.9.
and they're struggling.
Right, but I'm
They
just saying,
are-
so how are we the, you said that we're the highest mill rate now? But we're not
Flair-
the highest mill rate.
In towns our size,
Valley View's not on this.
no, it's only 1,700. And the reason, if you go back to McLennan residential is 20%. That's why there are nobody that is at all.
Non-residential 30.
That's right. So you can imagine 30% on a $300,000 business is $15,000. There's no business in McLennan.
And right now on this list, we're the second lowest non-residential mill rate. On this list, sorry, I mean, it's small list, but
that
I mean
is
just.
not, that if you were to actually look at places like Grimshaw, Athabasca, these are our comparators.
These are just our neighbors, so I mean, that's also another comparable, right? Cause if people
Well-
are gonna live here, they're gonna live in Slave Lake, or they're gonna live in McLennan, or they're gonna live in Flair, or they're gonna live in Valley View, depending on where their job is, right? So they're maybe not gonna go to Grimshaw.
No, so go to the engineers. Councillor Emter, I want to reply to him first about, you asked the treasurer whether or not there was any towns that had a levy on vacant lots. The town of McLennan has a levy. It's a $500 levy on any vacant lot that is not developed in residential. Lots are being turned back to the towns. They're just walking away from them. Here's the lot, we're not paying the extra $500 because the lot is already assessed at something like $1,200. There is no market, there's nothing going on in McLennan, and that's what happens when you try to.
That's okay, I'll take it back. I'll sell it.
Madam Chair, I want to say a big thank you for allowing for this kind of discussion. I think it's worthwhile, and we can see how we all think about it. There are just 2 points I want to make, more to do with my staff. And one good thing is that Eb and I are relatively new, 3 years. But what we do bring to the table is our academic qualifications, which obviously is in a lot in its own way. It's a CMA, MBA, and an MBA. What that combines with is the several years of experience that we have in our staff. And when we combine the two, anytime we sit down to look at our budget, all we are asking is how best can we serve this town? It surprises me that we all tend to think alike, myself and my senior management, that we are selfless in how we want to serve this town, either by how we reduce costs or how we improve the revenue. At no point in time do we sit down and we have a kind of big discrepancy. Everybody's working in the same direction for the betterment of this town. I will give half of my salary to work for this town. I was at the Truth and Reconciliation show at a short conference on Friday, and a lot of people that met me that I was working in high priority, gee, how far this town has come. And I felt so good. 3 years ago when we went to or 2 years ago when we went to the AUMA, when things were going bad, and the former councillors were being attacked, or they felt embarrassed. We didn't know where to hide. But today we can look up and we can say, you know what? The time has come for high prayer. Kerry Smith went to Peavine, and the whole place was charged. There just seems to be some kind of spirit, and I don't explain that. I think council, staff alike, we're doing something great. Can we do more? Yes. Can we work closely together? We should. Can we have better times ahead? Sure, it's going to happen. But my staff can promise all of you that we will do whatever it takes ensure that the town of High Prairie is efficient and effective, not just for today's people, but for the children that are coming. This is one of the most cosmopolitan environments that you can ever find, and it's so envious. It's a welcoming environment. It's an environment that I personally, if I wasn't living in Edmonton, I would move my family down here. It's a beautiful town. That's all I can say.
Councillor Long?
Just call a question.
You call the question?
I move that we,
We have a motion, I believe.
do we have the motion already?
I would like this to be a recorded vote. All right, any other questions? Okay, could you read the motion, please?
Moved by Councillor Carrier that council approve the 2014 final operating budget as presented.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
I would like to see options next year,
Could you speak up, please?
I was telling our treasurer that I'd like to see options or ideas next year. I'd like to see things brought forth, or accomplishments you've done where you've lowered the operating expenses, either through efficiencies, getting rid of certain contracts, whatever. Don't go away yet, Mike, we're going to camera. Next year.
Well, we can do some of it this year.
Yeah, no, he's gonna bring it forth how successful it is next year.
Oh, I see. All right.
Well, one thing I can say is, every year that we've been here, we brought it in under budget. So I think that in itself is a